Let's get the latest on the Ontario Progressive Conservative leadership race, just a few weeks away, actually, from voting day. We welcome back to TVO John Mykytyshyn. He's the president of the Bradgate Research Group and represents Patrick Brown's campaign. And the MPP for Prince Edward-Hastings, there's Todd Smith, and he represents the Christine Elliott campaign. Gentlemen, welcome. Two items of business before we start. There obviously is a third candidate in the race, Monte McNaughton. We asked for his campaign to bring us somebody today, and they were unable to do so, so that is why nobody is here representing the McNaughton campaign. And as I have to do every time we have this kind of a discussion, in the interest of full disclosure, my wife is part of the, volunteer advisory group that is helping Christine Elliott right now, so we put that on the table for everybody to know. John, what's the state of the race right now?
Well, it's slowly getting exciting. It is the longest race in party history. After a large delay after the inevitable reality of the June election results that our current leader, Mr. Hudak, decided to retire from the leadership position. And so that's a long process, has added to the dullness of it. And
you think it has been dull?
Dull and uninteresting for most people who aren't involved, but we're about to hit the exciting stage, and we've already hit one of them. So, for example, our party is on an upswing. You would have the biggest measure, I mean, there's always question of who's in first, who's in second, how do you gauge anything? And when reality hits, a metric that is real, number of members, our party now, and the party's still figuring out memberships and processing things, but absolutely beyond any measure, you would have thought that a party that's another 5 years in opposition would have had lower than the last leadership 5 years ago. And instead, we could almost double the memberships we had last time. You
signed up, I think, 40,000 5 years ago, and now it's about 80,000. Is that the idea?
Yeah, it was around 43, and it's going to be over 82. So it's like, every time the party comes out, they're feeling more comfortable with a larger number. And that's absolutely a sign of a party that is in good shape, that's invigorated, there's a lot of interest in. And again, among conservatives, right? So not among the general public, but that's not the contest.
We'll get to that. Todd Smith, how do you see the state of the race right now?
Well, we're in the home stretch, as John said, and thankfully we are in the home stretch. It has been a long haul. It's been far too long as far as I'm concerned. There's a lot of issues for us to deal with, and one is the fact that we did have that devastating loss in June, and we're a party that has to pay off some debt. So this has been far too long. Excuse me. But I feel that very comfortable that Christine Elliott's camp is in the lead right now, and I feel that because we've got 34,000 members that we've signed up. We feel very strong that they're committed, Christine Elliott people, and we're really looking forward to getting May 3rd and May 7th on the way and
those are the
have a new
dates.
leader. Yeah, those are the voting dates. Yeah.
Let's just, because I know we're probably not going to get agreement on this, but let's, for the heck of it, go through it anyway. The Elliott campaign says they've signed up 34,000 new members. The Brown campaign says they've signed up north of 40,000 members. Is that right?
Right.
How do you say that you're in the lead? Because last I checked, 40,000 is a larger number than 34,000.
Yeah, I mean, we know that there have been a lot of numbers thrown around. There's been a lot of exaggeration that's been thrown around by, frankly, our competitors in this race. When it comes down to committed members, we believe very strongly that Christine has those committed members that are going to put us over the top.
Committed members means people who are actually going to show up to vote?
People who are actually going to show up to vote. John's been around this game a long time, a lot longer than I have. I've been a party member since 2011, that's it. But from being on the other side of the microphone where you are, Steve, I know that we watch and we see lots of numbers in races in years gone by that have been inflated, and then when the party actually says what the numbers are, they're a lot less than what the parties claim they are, and I believe that's probably what's gone on so far in this race.
Well, let's talk turnout for a second then, John, because I think last time turnout was, I think, somewhere between 50 and 60%. I think in 2004, when John Tory won the leadership of the party, turnout was just above 40%. So turnout's a thing. What percentage of that 40,000 new signups that the Brown campaign has do you think are actually going to show up to vote in the first week of May?
Historic number. So more than ever before.
And what gives you that confidence?
Because of the team that's in place. I can tell you that with all due respect to the 17,000 that the Elliott campaign claimed they submitted on the day they were handing them in, And a few days later, they decided to redo math because they couldn't cope with 40,000. And in a world of first place versus second place, 40,000 versus 34 is a clear indicator of the importance of math. The reality is that we've got a team that's experienced, that has a track record of delivering the vote, and we've got some new ideas and a bunch of new people involved that very clearly where we came from day one was it was never about sign-ups. It was about signing up people who could vote on May the 3rd. That the most important thing was your support is wonderful, your check is great, but what we really need is someone to join to support Patrick who would be committed to show up on May 3rd and cast a ballot.
So of that 40,000, you say historically high numbers will come out. You want to put a number on it?
Yeah, I was going to say historically where they've been is you're right. The same thing with nomination meetings, right? They usually range between 40 and 50%. So I think for our people, we're looking at north of 60.
So 25,000 votes.
At least.
Okay.
I think the bottom line, though, Steve, is that the people that are going to come out are going to be vote, and this is what this phase of the campaign is the persuasion part of the campaign. Some members may have bought memberships, but now they're actually looking at who the three combatants are in this race. In my opinion, there's one candidate that stands apart from the three, and that is Christine Elliott. She is the one that can stand up to Kathleen Wynne. She's the one that can win the next election, quite honestly. I don't believe that the others can.
Let me, since you brought that up, Ian McDonald in iPolitics wrote a pretty interesting column the other day, which I don't know if the two of you have seen, but his conclusion was, Brown has the ground troops to win the convention, but he probably can't win an election. Elliott has the reputation and the kind of middle-of-the-road positions to win an election, but she may not be able to win her party's convention. That was his conclusion. What's your view on that?
I think it's really important to win the race that's in front of you. And I also think that all successful leaders have grown throughout their leaderships. So, for example, anyone who's ever become premier wasn't the front runner usually at the beginning of their leadership contest, often the surprise victor, but weren't ready that next day to be the leader of the province of Ontario. And what's good for us is, unlike Mike Harris in 1990, when you had a few months, it could have been a year and a half, but the Liberals decided to play games and short circuit the democratic process, and which gave Mike a loss and 4 years to prepare.
I think you're referring to the fact that there was an early election called in 1990, which didn't give Mike Harris as much time to mature as the new leader of the third party as he might have.
Absolutely. And what we have now is we have 3 years for the victor, the new leader of the party, which will be Patrick Brown, to prepare for the next role, which will be to heal the party, bring people together, be inclusive, which is not something that we've had in leadership victors in the last 3 go-rounds, and to build a team to go forward united in 3 years to defeat the Liberals and bring good government back to Ontario.
Todd?
Yeah, we have to bring the entire party together, but we have to do that behind Christine Elliott. If we don't elect Christine Elliott as our leader, basically we're handing another 4 years to Kathleen Wynne and the Liberals. We have to put forward a leader who can win in 2018.
How do you know Brown can't?
Listen, it's not just me that knows he can. I mean, Christine has the support from 25 members. 25 members of Patrick Brown's own caucus on Parliament Hill have put their support behind Christine Elliott because she's the one that can win. And I think that speaks volumes. The fact that almost the entire PC caucus, all members who have been elected and know how to win, have thrown their support behind Christine Elliott. People know that she's the one that can win. Patrick has been on Parliament Hill for 9 years. There have been 170 different cabinet shuffles, positions that have moved around by the Prime Minister. And Patrick has never even been given a parliamentary secretary position. He's never been a junior minister. So the Prime Minister knows something that the entire party should know, and that is that Patrick Brown can't do it. We need Christine Elliott there to win.
This is something I mean, we all hear this, right?
Sure.
We hear this all the time that, on numerous occasions, Stephen Harper has looked at his caucus when considering cabinet appointments, and for some reason, for almost 10 straight years, he's overlooked Patrick Brown, both for a cabinet job and for a parliamentary secretaryship. Why?
I'd suggest the bench strength has been pretty amazing. We have had and still have a lot of great people in caucus, and it speaks to the depth. So to say that someone hasn't been a member of cabinet, they have no value whatsoever, it'd be like saying my great colleague here is useless because he's never been a member of government or a member of a cabinet. That's ridiculous. I believe that and there's the rare exception, but I believe that almost without exception, that if people have been elected to the House of Commons or to the Ontario legislature, that they're great people who are capable of fulfilling the role of a cabinet minister, and that they would do a great job. The job of leader, though, is somewhat different. And that's where, Christine has been put to that challenge once before and failed to win. Her family's been through this 3 times. I feel for how devastating it would be at 4 times.
We want to explain what these references mean. Her late husband, Jim Flaherty, ran for the leadership how many times? Twice in Ontario. Yeah, did not win either time. Yeah.
So she's, she was my second choice last time, frankly. I worked for Frank Cleese last time, and she was my second choice. History's borne out my judgment at that point in time, but the reality is the caucus often gets it wrong. And the reality is we have the smallest caucus we've had in quite some time. And what really matters isn't going to be the opinion of you or myself or a caucus, but it's going to be the 80+ thousand members of the party. And that's what's great about one member, one vote. The elites matter less than ever.
Let's deconstruct this a little bit, because it's not really one person, one vote. It's one person, one vote in their riding. Mm-hmm. And it's a point system, meaning that if you've got, Patrick Brown's team got 40,000 sign-ups, and they're all in 2 ridings, that's not going to get you very far.
Absolutely.
What I hear from the Elliott people is that their 34,000 are more evenly distributed and therefore pack a bigger wallop than Patrick Brown's 40,000. True or false?
It's true.
False and spin, because he would be able to. You
go first and I'll spin you.
Well, okay, I'm just going to say the reality is, and I have no doubt that when their number is as low as 17,000 as it is, that what they're trying to do is come up with a rationalization for why to stay in the race, cause the campaigns to spend at least $500,000 more than need be, and rather than saying it's over and let's get on with fighting the Liberals.
You've done something a few times now that I have to just try to follow up on, and that is you keep saying 17,000 instead of 34,000. Right. I'm not sure you can have it both ways. Either they've got 34,000, which takes you to 80,000 when you include Monte McNaughton's numbers, and that's a newly invigorated, signed up twice as many members as last time kind of party, or they're at 17, and you haven't signed up 80,000 members, and therefore this party isn't as reinvigorated as you're saying it is. So which is it?
Well, what I'm saying is that there's a lot of mischief making with the numbers, and what Patrick and his campaign have called for is for the party to release the numbers as soon as possible. And not all campaigns have done that. Not all campaigns have come aboard and say the party, the umpire, the neutral people should say what were the actual number of memberships submitted to the party on the day of the deadline. And that hasn't been done. So until they do that, you're going to have this mischief making.
Okay. I mean, here's the king of mischief making. I mean, we know that. John, you've been around the party for a long time. You're a party insider, and I mean, you've probably written books on it. You know how these games are played with numbers. We're very, very confident in the fact that we have 34,000 people who are going to come out to vote for Christine Elliott across 107 ridings.
They're not all going to
in Ontario.
You are going to have some drop-off.
There may not, but we're very confident in our numbers and the people that are going to come out. And I've spent a lot of time as PC Caucus outreach chair to communities across the GTA. I know from talking to a lot of my friends who are organizers with Patrick Brown, the people that I've met over the last 2 or 3 years, that they've signed up thousands in Scarborough and in Brampton. But you have to have the members across the province in order to win. And we have a very solid organization that has done that.
Well, let me follow up with this then, because on the one hand, that's right. Patrick Brown hasn't been in cabinet. He's been in Parliament Hill for almost 10 years and hasn't left huge footprints by the traditional ways that people look at these things. On the other hand, and he used to be at Queen's Park 15 years ago. He had a role at Queen's Park with the Conservatives 15 years ago. What does it say about the strength of the Elliott campaign? What does it say about the strength of the Ontario PC party that a guy who's been out of Queen's Park for 15 years, that a guy who hasn't left a lot of footprints in Ottawa can decide to run for Ontario PC party leader and come out of a cannon on membership sign-off day? What does that say?
Well, I think it says that he did some really solid groundwork in the GTA, but we need a solid organization right across the province, and that's what we put together right from day one. Christine was quick out of the gates in last June, announcing that her intentions to lead. She wants to lead this party, and she wants to lead this province, and she's committed to it. She's put together a great organization that's going to be able to put her over the top on May 9th, and I feel strongly about that. And I think, you know, John wants to talk about how many members we've signed up. And I think he would rather talk about how many members he signed up, because when you look at the resumes of the two candidates, there's really one that stands above the other. I mean, Christine Elliott has had an exemplary career in politics, but she has so much more than that. Patrick has been a career politician, and he has never really accomplished much on Parliament Hill in 9 years. You know, Christine has accomplished a lot at Queen's Park. She was a very, very she did very well in business, her own business, a very successful lawyer, very successful in charitable organizations in her own riding, and she raised 3 triplet boys. I mean, she has all kinds of life experience. I think she's the one that's ready to lead.
That is a reference to the fact that Patrick is unmarried with no kids, and for some conservatives, that's a big deal. The fact that Christine Elliott would have more quote-unquote real-life experience.
She absolutely appeals to the elite, and the reality is, for those few hundred people that make up the elite and the couple thousand people that they influence, that's going to be a major factor in their decision. But for the vast majority of the 80,000 plus people that are eligible to vote, and for the majority of people who do show up to vote, I don't believe it's going to be a contest on the criteria that the LA people would like. The other thing is, I don't want to fault them, because it's hard for any campaign to know what the real number is. So I've given you numbers, he's giving you numbers, and the truth is, it might be less than 17,000. Until the party gives us the list.
He wants to talk about numbers.
No, until the party gives us the list, we don't know two things.
Exactly.
We don't know what the big number is, and we don't know how many in each riding. Now, I know, because I can tell you yesterday, that I went to the headquarters and I went through the file folders, 107 ridings, and I can tell you I'm more than comfortable that the memberships don't exist in 2 or 3 ridings. Now, there are some places like Whitby where we did way better than we were expecting to be, in Oshawa, and
that's
places.
Elliott's riding.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting on Election Day, but all of that doesn't matter. What matters is absolutely what was just said, and that is that it's the breadth. And the breadth of the campaign is going to win. And for all the spin, all that matters is because it's really a 2-person contest. With all due respect to Monty, who's a great guy, at the end of the day, whether it's first or second ballot, it is going to be the candidate who on first ballot places ahead in more ridings than any other candidate.
Let's do, I don't want to get too far down the road here, but you've mentioned Monte McNaughton, and 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 signups? Do we know? Whatever it is.
Again, it's the same thing.
It's around there. It's around there.
We'll be nice to him since he's not here and agree that we don't know.
Here's the question. Does Christine Elliott have to win this on the first ballot? Because if she doesn't, McNaughton's supporters, who are, I think, disproportionately made up of the evangelical Christian community, will almost certainly go to 90% of them to Patrick Brown on the second ballot.
Listen, Monty's a great guy, and he's a great caucus member, and I honestly think that a lot of the people will follow where Monty wants to go, and I fully believe that Monty is going to want to go with Christine Elliott.
Well, of course, this is a secret ballot, and it's a preferential
that's
ballot,
right.
so it's not like a delegated convention where they're going to follow him on the floor to wherever he goes.
No, exactly.
They got to vote twice right off the top.
That's right, and I think there are a lot of people, quite honestly, they're probably supporting Monty and only supporting Monty because they're Monty people.
That's always true in any race, to be fair, with all the candidates.
Yeah.
The other thing I hear about Patrick Brown is he hasn't actually committed to running provincially, which is...
that's fascinating, because
Okay.
I was waiting for clarification as to whether or not Christine Elliott has committed to running in the next election if Patrick is the leader.
Okay, that's a nice deflection, but
Very good deflection.
It's a great question.
We haven't seen any kind of commitment from Patrick.
The fact is, Elliott's been there for a few elections in a row now, and Patrick Brown is, of course, a member of Parliament in Ottawa.
Who hasn't given up his seat.
Who has not given up his seat.
And caused a needless by-election for the Prime Minister.
And who has not committed, one way or another, to running in Ontario politics, which is, of course, the arena in which he is hoping to lead right now. Is that problematic?
I don't think so.
Why
I think
not?
you take, like I say, one step at a time, the task that's in front of you. Right now, and to be fair, let's be clear, when Patrick announced that he was intended on running, he would have had a conversation in Ottawa, and he would have not been stripped of his GTA portfolio, for example. He is the GTA chair. So, he has the quiet support of people, or all these things could have been taken away from him. It's not good for the party. It's not good for politics to have a needless by-election. And the timing is excellent, though, in that the election will be this fall. So we elect a new leader May 9th, and then there's ample time to prepare for the next seat.
If it's Brown, then he obviously doesn't run for re-election.
Perfect
If
opportunity.
it isn't Brown, then he does run for re-election.
Absolutely.
And I mean, the GT caucus chair doesn't really mean all that much. He's not the GTA minister. That was Jim Flaherty, and now, of course, it's Joe Oliver, and Joe Oliver is supporting Christine Elliott. So, those who are in these positions are supporting Christine.
Let's do two more quick things before we finish up here.
Fair. Patrick does have the majority.
He's clearly setting this up as you've got the elites and he's got the people type of thing. Mm-hmm. And I think it's fair to say that the Conservative Party, of the, however you want to count, 3 or 4 main parties in Canada, there's an anti-elitist streak that goes through Conservatives in a way that it maybe doesn't in some of the other parties. Are you concerned that she's seen as the candidate of the elites and Brown is seen as the candidate of the grassroots?
Not at all. I've been traveling the province with Christine, and we've been in Stirling, and we've been in Scarborough, and we've been in Brampton. We've been right across the province in rural Ontario. She connects with people, and that's why people like her. And you know who she especially connects with? Is women. And that's the problem that we've had with our party for the last couple of elections. Our former leader didn't connect with women. We struggled to get out of single digits in support on ballot day from women. Women gravitate towards Christine Elliott because she's a successful woman. She's a role model. She's a great family person who's raised 3 triplet boys. I mean, she connects with people. And I think that the women across Ontario are going to come out in droves in 2018 to support Christine Elliott to be the next Premier of Ontario.
Okay, last question here, and that is, what is the most misunderstood thing about your candidate? Todd Smith, what's the most misunderstood thing by the public of Christine Elliott?
The most misunderstood? Boy, he didn't give me much time to think about this. I mean, Christine is who she is. I think maybe people don't recognize the fact, and I hear this all the time from people, oh, that's former Finance Minister Jim Flaherty's wife, because of the different last name. I think that's a meaningful thing for a lot of people. They know that Jim was one of the great cabinet ministers we had at the provincial level, and then one of the great finance ministers that the world has ever seen, in my opinion. I mean, he did great things here. And a lot of people don't connect those two things. So I don't know if that's a misunderstanding, but it's just something that they don't necessarily tie together right away. So.
What's the most misunderstood thing the public may believe about Patrick Brown?
Well, they don't know him, to be fair. And if they did, what will be missing is how hard he works. He is almost singularly the best politician I've ever met in 30 years of politics.
Say that again?
He is almost certainly the best politician in 30 years of politics from my observing. No, hang on.
You've been around
for his ability to be focused on the task at hand and to work tirelessly.
More than Mike Harris?
Yes.
Mike Harris is a pretty successful Conservative politician.
Successful and a great man, but the reality is Patrick, when he got elected, and he started with a defeat, which a lot of people walk away from after they've run for office and been defeated. But he took that on, and a couple years later had another opportunity, got elected. And in 3 elections, he's substantially increased his vote each time. He's made Barrie and you cannot walk the streets of Barrie, mention the name Patrick Brown, and not know how well liked the man
personal
is.
fiefdom, there's no doubt about
and
it.
for everything he's done. So in any task he's taken on, he knew as a backbencher, the first thing you do for yourself and for your party is to make sure you retain the seat again and again and again. And he has developed a network of people serving many communities.
Okay, but I wanted to focus on, sorry, you go ahead and then I'm going to come back.
I just want to say, and that is my biggest concern about Patrick Brown, is the fact that people don't know who Patrick is.
That's why
we've got the Working Families Coalition that we're up against, and the Elections Ontario officer just came out with his report, Greg Asenza, saying that $9 million was spent in third-party advertising. People don't know Patrick Brown. They know Christine Elliott, and they know what she's all about and what she stands for. The Working Families Coalition and the Liberals are going to be the ones to define Patrick Brown.
And I agree with you on that.
That's what we have to be worried about.
Let me tell you, I'm worried about that too. The Working Families Coalition, if we select Tim Hudak's deputy leader for 5 years, side by side with Tim, right there with him on 100,000 job cuts. I don't know what the Working Families Coalition does with the clips that they have available from her public appearances in the last campaign.
Patrick was right there too. Patrick was right there too, shaking Tim's hand when he made the announcement.
But he wasn't the deputy leader, wasn't part of the policy process, didn't know about the plans.
Christine Elliott didn't know about the plans either. I learned of them the same day everybody else did on May 9th.
There might be a difference of opinion on that.
Let's finish up on this. Again, I saw Patrick Brown at an event in Ottawa last night. And the reason I asked this question is that he said, people are exaggerating how much of a social conservative I am. He said, I'm not going to, if I win this thing and become premier, I'm not going to reopen the abortion debate.
Right.
Monte McNaughton has more social conservatives backing him, Brown said, than I do. There is a sense out there, because I hear it all the time, that Patrick Brown is too socially conservative to win the leadership and to win the province. Is that true?
When I met him many years ago, because he's been involved for over 20-something years in the party, he was...
Which blows his establishment.
No, he was a grassroots member.
Yeah.
He wasn't part of the people who brought us destruction in the last election. The reality is that when I met him, he was, because I've always been tagged a little bit to the right within the party. Oh. The reality for Patrick was, when I met him, he was a red Tory. That was his group, that was his friends, that was his social network.
Is he still?
He describes himself as a pragmatic conservative, and when I look at the things he's taken a position on or what he's talked about, he believes in having an open debate, he believes in democracy, he believes in having everybody at the table, he believes in including communities that have never been included before. The thing I found most striking is during a leadership contest, for him to be able to walk into all these different communities and say, I've been here, not this time during the leadership, but I've been at these meetings for years, and there's still no other candidates in this race in the room with him.
You've got to get to Queen's Park and introduce a bill, so that's our time. Can I thank John Mykytyshyn and Todd Smith for coming into TVO tonight and helping us out with this?
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Pleasure.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.